That's a good question. So yeah, it's interesting. In the past year, I've worked on this project, voiceover, and also theater and film stuff. So I think with theater, obviously there's a lot in your body. Like the way you are presenting yourself is a big part of it. Is like how you're moving. Like the character. Like you have to think about like, oh, how does this character move? Um, with film, there's a bit of that as well, but it's often more focused, just on your face. So then everything has to be like the emotions are still there, but everything has to be kind of compressed into your face and kind of more subtle. And then, of course, with audio acting, it's just your voice. So it's kind of like the it's both easier and harder because you are able to you only have to use your voice to express yourself, but you also have to express everything through your voice. So it's an interesting kind of exercise to have to kind of channel everything into the vocal performance.
As a new actor to join Theater in the Dark, what sort of things were the same or different from other audio plays you've been in?
So this is It's interesting to think about that. So this year, for example, I was in this project with Theater in the Dark, the audio play, but I was also in an audio drama that's currently airing in sequence called On the Night Train, which is with the Merry Beggars. And in that project, we were all in one room together recording. So with that, you could sort of like play off of each other, like in the room. There's that energy in the space. In the case of A Murder in the Court of Xanadu, we were all recording in our individual apartments. So we were we were able to kind of see each other a little bit more and interact with each other in some of the rehearsals. But like in the recording, like at least for me personally, I was in my recording booth, so it was kind of like my relationships with the other characters had to be like totally in my imagination essentially because I couldn't see any of them. I didn't have anything to respond to visually. I only had their voices in my ears. So it's a weird sort of out of body experience. But I think turned out well and still effective. It's just an interesting exercise as an actor.
There's a sort of Shakespeare's Iago vibe in the way you play your character. How much of that was your own interpretation of the character, and how much came from the writer slash director?
I think this sort of Shakespeare Iago vibe. There was definitely a little bit that we sort of talked about that, um, but I think a lot of that was sort of just what how I saw the character when I read it and sort of what I went with. Definitely, Corey and I worked together to kind of mold it because we talked about we didn't want it to be like too too villain, like too much of like an obvious villain, because he is villainous in some ways, but everybody makes mistakes in this show, and as in real life, right? So we didn't want it to be like super like, oh, this is obviously the scheming bad guy, like he was talking about how some auditions he received, he was almost seemed like Jafar or something that's very sort of over the top sort of villain. So something I was really trying to do was strike that balance between like, yes, he is scheming, but he is vulnerable. And Corey was somebody who really helped me kind of find that and fine tune it.
Okay, last question, and my question for you or whatever, because it kind of came out of nowhere, so let's make sure. This question for a little bit more, actually, obviously controversial, but it's controversial issue, I guess. As an actor who's playing a Muslim character, how did that, like, was there any worry on your part, anything like, maybe not pigeonhole, but the controversy surrounding it's like, essentially blackface, I guess, audio, I guess, so, yeah.
Yeah. No, that's a great question because yeah, Corey and I talked about this. So yeah, when I after I was cast, I think it was after I was cast that I realized this character was Muslim. And yeah, certainly we're in a period right now where we're trying to be very sensitive about, I think particularly like people who are often in positions of power, which is often white people, like playing non-white roles. So that made me a little nervous at first going into it, and I talked to Corey about it. Um, but we were kind of talking about how like because the way this story is told, it's obviously inspired by events that happen in Asia, and this would have been an Arab character, but like there's nothing in our particular script that says, yeah, like he could be a white person who's a Muslim, for example. That's a possibility. And I think the fact that if you look at the casting of this piece, it's very racially diverse. So I think that made me feel comfortable. It's not like we're a bunch of white people telling the story. Like there's, the actors are of all different races. So I think that those things kind of made me feel more comfortable with it. And obviously it's also an audio play. So I think there's a little bit more, but yeah, definitely. It's definitely something we thought about and talked about. And I certainly hope it doesn't offend anyone. And certainly that wasn't the intention. Um, but I think the big thing with these kind of things is always you always want to make sure you're thinking about them, and then you can kind of go from there. Like you don't want to just go in like, oh yeah, whatever, So I think if you think about it, you talk about it, and you're like, it seems like we're being responsible here. That's kind of the conclusion we came to.
I personally love audio dramas so much more than audiobooks. And the reason why is because I get to interact with all these other characters. It is literally a movie for your ears, and audiobooks, it's a one-woman show, one-man show, if you want to put it that way. And with the audio drama, you have to really work well with other characters. You have to understand their motive. You have to um, nail that relationship the way you would on stage or on screen. The chemistry between characters can be heard. And that's the challenge. And that's also part of what makes it so thrilling, because when it's cohesive and everything does come together well, it's beautiful. And it's that movie for your ears is so much more pleasing. There's a lot about Marla that I was intrigued by. The first was upon getting the script and reading through it, dissecting it, I noticed immediately that she was a character that transcended socioeconomic backgrounds, positions, class. She was able to interact with Gabe's character. She was able to interact with the clowns. She was able to interact with people that not don't necessarily have a reason to interact, because she has a little bit of more of that omnipresent um, feel to her, which is what I liked. It was a privilege to be able to do that and to play around with relationships and kind of peek into their world, even though she was not someone that would be normally privy to that. And the second thing was just her overall slyness. It's part of the whole, can you trust the narrator? Can you really believe in what she has to say and her story? So I really liked playing to that sly, cunning edge to her, where she might be saying something, but is she really just trying to sell you something? Is she really, what's her ulterior motive? Because not everything that she says is should be taken at face value. And that's the added layer to Marla that I really liked.